Hey guys, it's wonderful to see those beautiful smiling faces. Today we're talking about still life drawing. If you don't know what still life drawing is, check out these pictures here. A still life drawing is one where the artist is looking at an object and drawing what they see, or a group of objects, and the idea is that these are objects that sit still. They are not things that move, so you're not trying to draw an animal or a person. You're not trying to draw things that are blowing in the wind or outdoors that are moving around. You're trying to draw something that is just sitting still on a table in front of you. The most iconic idea for a still life drawing, the one that every artist does at some point in their life, is the classic bowl of fruit. You draw a bowl, you draw some fruit, maybe there's an orange, maybe there's a banana, maybe there's, maybe this is like a bunch of bananas, maybe there's an apple, that has a leaf on its stem. Maybe there's another orange. That bowl of fruit. This is just me making stuff up, so this is not a still life drawing. I like to not call it a still life because the word still life gets confusing. I like to call it observational drawing. Still life describes what you're drawing. Observational drawing describes how you're drawing it. Instead of just making up a bowl of fruit, let's look at a bowl of fruit. Now, if you're copying from a photograph like I am today, there's a lot of different methods that you can actually copy from a photograph. But I'm not talking about how to draw from a photograph today. I'm using a photograph because it's something you can all follow along with. I'm leaving a link in the description where you can get this photograph. This was from Pixabay, which just is free pictures for anyone to use. Anyway, the point here is to learn how to look. Use your eyeballs, those little eyeballs of yours right there. Use those to look at something and draw what you see, right? That's what observational drawing is all about. So what I personally like to do when I am working on a still life or observational drawing, I like to start with something that's large and can be compared to lots of other things. So I'm going to start with this big long swoosh of the bowl. Notice that it's not a straight line. It curves. Okay, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure how long that is. Oh my gosh, it's longer than I can measure with my hand. I could use a ruler to measure it, or I could do this. That's how wide it is. Now, what I'm going to do is draw that here on my paper. It's this wide. So what I want to do is kind of mark with my fingers how wide it is, and then carry that down. I don't want my fingers to move towards each other or away from each other. I want to keep them the same distance apart. Just slide it down to my paper. Now, if you were actually looking at the bowl, this is where you would do things like, you've seen artists who like hold up their pencil and then they slide their thumb across it. Well, that's because they're measuring. Like my hand is floating up above. I'm not putting it down on here. If I hold it up here and just look through that camera, like I can measure. That's how wide that peach there is, right? From the end of the eraser to the tip of my thumb, right? So that's what artists are doing when they're sliding like this. And that's one way that I could measure that if I was actually, looking at an actual bowl of fruit. But if I've got a photograph here, I'm just going to measure like this, drop that down onto my paper, mark the ends, and then see, kind of follow the curve. I like to do what's called air drawing. I'll draw in the air until I get along that right curve, right? Practice drawing that. And then once I've practiced drawing that curve, move that up to the top so I'm not tracing it here. Once I've practiced drawing that curve, then I can come here onto my paper, and draw that curve in. Now, didn't quite get it that first try, but whatever. This is why you would normally use an eraser. I'm using a Sharpie so it shows up better on the camera. Then we need to talk about the bottom of this bowl. So I'm going to measure how tall the distance from the top of the bowl to the bottom of the bowl is. I'm going to mark that here on my page. And then it's just a nice smooth curve, right? Almost like a semicircle from both sides down to that point. Like that. So that's the bowl. Now, these fruits, these objects that are coming out of the bowl, I'm going to start by picking one of them and figuring out where it belongs, right? So I'll start, I guess, with this one because, you know, basically I see a whole nice, I mean, not the whole circle because part of it is under, you know, behind the bowl, but I see a really nice smooth curve. So that's going to be an easy one to start with. So I'll start with that one. I wouldn't want to start with a funky shape like that. I'll start with a nice simple shape. First thing I'm going to do is figure out how far across from the end of the bowl to the edge of that fruit. I'm going to mark that here on my page. Then I'm also going to measure how wide is that piece of fruit. Mark that here on my page. Then I'm also going to measure how tall is the part that I see. And mark that here on my page. And then I can make a nice smooth curve between those. That is this peach. Now, there are some other little shapes in there that I could add. And the way that I could do that, I could like try to measure. It's such a small thing that if I try to measure it with my fingers are bigger than that little spot. But I could just kind of, I want to look closer at the shape of it though, right? It's kind of pointy at the top and then it's kind of round at the bottom, almost teardrop shaped. Something like that, okay? That's this peach, done, okay? And then, so like there's this lemon. Notice that the lemon overlaps behind the peach right here, okay? So if I was going to draw this lemon, I would measure how far across it is to where it overlaps behind the bowl. I'd mark that right about there. I'd measure how far up on the peach. Mark that right there. I'll measure how tall it is from the top of the bowl to the top of the lemon. Mark that right there. Notice it is higher than the peach. It is higher than the peach. Good. And now this is, let's see, the lemon, I actually measured to the sort of point. It might be hard to see on the camera, but there's like a little spot at the top. I should have measured to the top, so I'm going to give a little bit higher than that. I'm going to kind of go over that as I draw this lemon. Nice smooth curve. And then that spot on the top of the lemon, it kind of has like a spot and then a bump. And it's got a sort of, bumpy top to the shape there. All right, now this orange, notice that it's all the way to the edge of the bowl. All the way to the edge of the bowl. Now there's a little bit of thickness to the bowl that I didn't give here, so I'm just going to kind of round off the edge of the bowl here. And then from the inside of that part, the orange comes up. Notice that the bowl kind of sticks out a little bit past, and then actually is going to overlap behind the orange. I'll do that in a bit. Now, notice that from the top of the lemon to the top of the orange, they're pretty much the same height. So top of the lemon, top of the orange is pretty much the same height. How high up on the lemon does the orange overlap behind the lemon? That high. Mark it there. That high. All right. Now there's this slight dip to the shape. It's not a completely smooth curve, so make that slight dip into the curve there. All right? Okay? And then notice how the curve of the bowl swooshes around behind the orange. There we go. Okay, you can see how this is actually starting to come together and look like that bowl of fruit. Okay, so I'm just going to work my way back one little piece of fruit at a time. Now this peach here is going to be a little interesting because it's covered up at the top and on this side. I think I might do this orange first, then do this, then do the one on top of it. I don't know, but it's all the same methods that I've done before. The important thing here, when you're doing observational drawing or still life drawing, you have to measure things. You have to measure. And if you don't want to like look at a photograph and measure on the photograph like I'm doing, like this is a great way to practice measuring. But if you already get that and you're more interested in doing it, you know, like this method that where you like measure, that's how wide that is. And then you can compare things. Like that's the other thing is I can compare and say, well, this measurement here compared to this measurement here, like the width of that peach is the same as the width of that peach, right? Those are the same. Well, I could do that with this method too. I could say, well, that's how wide that peach is, and oh look, that's also how wide that peach is. They're the same width, right? So whatever measurement style you're using, use that same measurement method for everything, and then it'll come together quite nicely. Alright, so I didn't quite measure everything. A lot of things I tried to do, just eyeballing it, just looking and seeing, and things didn't quite end up exactly in the right place, but pretty close. Let's take a look. Let's do the big reveal. This is the photograph, and there's my drawing of it. So you can see some things like this avocado is not quite in the right place. It's a little too far to the left. You can see like the big cantaloupe or whatever melon this is. I made mine too big back behind there. It's too high up. The bananas, I made them a little too far over to the left. The top of the bunch of bananas made it a little bit too far to the left. But all in all, just from measuring, just from measuring and eyeballing it, no tracing or anything, it's not bad, right? It's pretty close, right? There's one thing that I totally forgot to do, and that's the edge of the table. Notice how the edge of the table overlaps behind the bowl on both sides. I'll go ahead and do that finishing touch right here. And that's all there is to it for a still life drawing. Now I could go back in and color, add the color of the different fruits. I could do shading, like there's some areas that are darker, like where there's shadows, and then there's also the avocado is just a darker, it's dark brown instead of bright oranges and yellows. So I could do shading in there, but just as a study, as a still life study, as an observational study, practice, this is a great way to practice getting your eyes used to looking and drawing what you see. Now, does that mean we should always draw what we see? No, as your job as an artist is to make the viewer see what you want the viewer to see, and but learning to draw what you see is a great start on that endeavor. Anyway, you can choose to use this photograph, which I've linked down in the description below, or draw something in the real world around you, something that's sitting on your table, or find a different photograph to copy from. But the idea here is just measuring, seeing how big things should be, and putting them in the right place by doing measurements. Anyway, that's all there is to it for today. I look forward to seeing your still life drawings.